In Privacy Watch, a new study published by several political scientists has found that Facebook is the most important mechanism facilitating the spread of fake news. According to an article published by Media Matters for America, the study finds, quote, heavy Facebook users were differentially likely to consume fake news, which was often immediately preceded by a visit to Facebook. The study compared the spread of fake news through other mediums as well, such as Google, Twitter, and email.
Just yesterday, the president tweeted about fake news, writing, "I will be announcing the most dishonest and corrupt media awards of the year on Monday at 5 o'clock. Subjects will cover dishonesty and bad reporting in various categories from the fake news media. Stay tuned." Here to discuss is Media Matters President Angelo Carasone. He and his organization wrote extensively on the study. We'd also like to add that CBS News has reached out to Facebook for comment, and we have not heard back. So, Angelo, explain the study and explain why Facebook is the most influential fake news source.
So what the study did was sort of connect two pieces of data together. They did a bunch of surveys of thousands of consumers of information and media, and on their patterns, on their habits, on their trust, whether or not they like fact checkers, trust fact checkers. And then they also had an enormous amount of data about how these users were engaging with information online. And what the study ultimately found were two critical pieces of takeaways. One was that 25% of Americans consumed Facebook in the last fake news in the last 6 weeks of the election. So 1 out of every 4 Americans were consuming fake news. And on top of that, that 30% of all of the fake news consumption in that period of time was driven by Facebook. So that was the first thing that it found. And then the second thing it found was that the consumers of fake news disproportionately don't even like fact checkers. So when they were asked about fact checking broadly, they had very hostile and negative sentiment about it. And that means that Facebook's primary solution for the fake news problem, which is to serve these people fact checks, is not going to work.
Yeah, so that was going to be my follow-up question, because I thought that was really interesting that the study indicates that people would prefer, a significant amount of the population would prefer to get their information from fake news outlets, fake news websites, than the actual fact checkers. Their sole job is to make sure that they're providing them with accurate information. So if they don't believe the fact checkers and they prefer to believe the fake news sites, then how do you solve this problem?
I think the biggest way that you solve this problem, and knowing that Facebook is actually a primary source of it, is helpful actually in solving the problem. You can't force those people to change, and you're not going to be able to educate them about the importance of fact checking. But what was really critical when you really dig into this data and other data that Media Matters has sort of compiled is that the engine of the fake news ecosystem is actually Facebook. It's the traffic that Facebook provides. And what we've found in our studies is that the overwhelming majority of these fake news websites, they're not even ideological. They're just doing it for clicks that they then convert into revenue. They're doing it for traffic. And so if you take away their ability to, or reduce their ability to get enormous amounts of traffic, they actually atrophy and go away. They stop producing this kind of content. And what that means is one critical thing. Facebook right now treats the way that it gives you content based on only one major metric, which is whether or not you're engaging with it. The more you like it, the more Facebook will share that to more people. And instead, what Facebook should do is treat their newsfeed the way that Google does. It's not that they punish content, they're not censoring content, but there should be an authority component to it. So if it's from a brand new website that just spun up, that has no reputation, it should certainly not be treated the same as CBS News when it comes to the algorithm deciding whether or not to serve it to more and more people just because it's getting a lot of clicks. That would go almost all the way in solving Facebook's fake news problem. And we know that because even this study shows it. Less than 1% of fake news was served up by Google in the same period of time that this study looked at. And that's because Google includes an authority component.
Well, so it's one thing, I mean, you raise this point that a lot of these posts are not even ideological. They may be somebody in another country. I saw reports of people in Macedonia and other countries that just figure out a way to make money by putting this stuff on Facebook. But it's quite another thing when you've got foreign governments actively engaging in posting fake news or news that is not factually correct for the purposes of either delegitimizing a candidate or bolstering another. And so what's the answer to getting rid of that?
You hit the nail on the head there. What makes this so destructive and damaging and scary, actually, is that this ecosystem has been around for a while, actually. Celebrity death hoaxes, they used to be the primary fake news ecosystem. Every time somebody would talk about a celebrity dying and there'd be like a website sort of scammy sounding that would, everyone would click on, those were fake news sites. They just were talking about, celebrity death hoaxes, or take this special product, eat more special beets or something, and you'll get, extra brain power. That used to be the fake news ecosystem. And so that has existed for a while, and those players started to get into the political space. So the infrastructure has long been there. But what happened in 2016 is that this model of foreign actors took their approach to exploiting that ecosystem for political and partisan purposes. And that's really damaging and scary. And so the solution actually is not to try to play a game of whack-a-mole and figure out who the worst players are and then just develop policies that specifically target them. It's not going to work, because even if you say, oh, we know that Macedonia is the problem, let's do something about where the traffic from Macedonia comes from, they'll just do it from another country. The solution actually is to come up with a policy prescription that is content neutral, geographically neutral. It doesn't matter who the bad actor is, but to prevent them from exploiting the ecosystem. And that exploit is right now largely centered around the fact that Facebook wants to serve you content that you engage with. And so they don't care where it comes from or who it's coming from. And in fact, Facebook's own algorithm turbocharges content, meaning if a bunch of people like something really fast, Facebook says, wow, this is interesting, I'm going to send it to even more and more people. I'm going to actually help spread it. That's why Facebook was named Misinformer of the Year for us, because they actually help spread misinformation simply because it's performing well. Google doesn't do that. Any good search engine doesn't do that. They have other problems, but they're certainly not helping spread intentional misinformation, whether it's from a foreign actor or just some random kid, just because it's performing well. And so the solution is to simply say, authority matters. And so we're not going to turbocharge content unless it comes from a reputable source. And you base a reputable source the same way that search engines do. How long it's been around for, whether other reputable sources have referenced it or linked to it. There are ways to solve this that don't require censorship and that don't require us to guess on where the next threat's going to come from. And Facebook's refusal to actually engage in it has been a big part of the problem.
Well, but here's a question.
So I thought that's part of the reason why the Misinformer of the Year title is so interesting, because it took them a long time to acknowledge that there was even fake news content and that they were part of the problem.
They were propagating this fake news. And it made me think of something, Angela, just listening to your comments about the amount of time and energy people invest in looking at Facebook and then clicking on the links that turn out to be fake news. Because growing up at the supermarket aisle, a newspaper that said Elvis was spotted in a gas station
with
in Minnesota with a couple of aliens, people knew instinctively that's not true. That is really fake news. What has changed in how we consume media, how we look at media, to change from the point where people go, well, that can't be true.
Why are we so gullible?
And now we're very, it seems that people are more taken in by what would have appeared in the supermarket checkout aisle 25 years ago.
Well, I think a part of it is that everyone sort of had a cue to know that, that what appeared in the supermarket checkout aisle were just tabloids that were designed to be salacious. And look, most people didn't buy them. Many people did, but most people would look because they were stuck there. You might see it, you might laugh, but, you weren't buying it. I think what's really changed here, and I think when people talk about fake news and disinformation, and I'm glad you asked, it's really what makes it so insidious is that they're actually capitalizing on people's trust in journalism. Because these websites aren't called fake news website or random information that I'm just serving to you because you're going to click it.com. They're making up names that sound like actual papers. San Francisco Chronicle Gazette, that's not a real newspaper, but that's a fake news site. Or Denver Guardian, that sounds very real. And so what happens is that these sites actually capitalize on people's inherent trust in news media. They're using a lot of right-wing commentators and other liars on TV. Oftentimes, when they're under criticism, they say, "Well, I couldn't be here saying all these things if they weren't true. They would take me off TV." And that's not necessarily true. But you prey on people's intuition and their natural, desire to trust journalism. I mean, most people get that journalism matters. That's why Donald Trump complains about them so much, because he realized that the power that journalists have is real power in a democracy. And so these fake news sites are really capitalizing on and exploiting people's trust. That's how they're able to be so effective. And that's really what makes this different from, say, the tabloids and other salacious things, is that we have cues to know those are for entertainment purposes, but these things are actually presenting themselves. They look and feel just like real news. And unless you go the extra mile, you wouldn't know.
It's so true. I mean, once upon a time, we had sort of a limited number of legitimate information outlets.
Right.
We knew what they were. If you were looking for a fact, you'd go to your encyclopedia. If you were looking for a word, you would go to a dictionary, the Oxford Dictionary or whatever. Now there are so many options that there's a voice of authority becomes more difficult to identify.
And it also makes it difficult, you know, Angela, when I was based in Africa, in Nigeria specifically, when those girls were kidnapped in April of 2014, many government officials told me that the reporting that I was doing was fake, that I was trying to besmirch the reputation of the Nigerian military. I was trying to, you know, make Nigeria as a country look bad. But that was before the environment that we live in now. That was 3 years ago. And I wonder how difficult it will be for the journalism that people put their lives on the line for around the world to do if the government, if the person at the top of the government points to you and says, you know, that's not true, that's fake news.
That's exactly right. And to your point, and that's what makes me so scared, and that's why, you know, Media Matters has put a large amount of our resources and energy into focusing on this particular part of the problem in the information landscape, is that it's not just about the United States. The same ecosystem that powers and drives the disinformation here in the States, it has been at play. It was very much a factor in the Brexit movement that led to the Brexit vote. You know, it was very much active in the lead up to the elections in France and Germany. It wasn't as damaging there because they activated a lot of countermeasures. They were very active as a populace to make sure that didn't happen. But in many other countries around the world, this exact part of the information ecosystem is being exploited by a whole range of bad actors, both internal and external. So it is really a platform-based problem. Facebook does need to come to terms with its role in sort of poisoning the information landscape and address it. And there are real meaningful solutions to that beyond thinking about censorship. That's not what's at issue here. They could solve this problem, but right now they're much more interested in mollifying their right-wing critics than they are in actually addressing what is a real existential threat to democracy and to real journalism.
Well, we have midterm elections coming up. We'll see if any of us have learned anything from this at all. Angelo Carasone, thank you so much. Great conversation.
Thanks.